Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Canada Today. Our show features Canadian Muslim stories, Canadian Muslim perspectives, as well as events on Muslim Network TV across and as well as on our social media platforms. I'm your host, Taha Ghayur. It is with a heavy heart that we are going to be talking about a region of a lot of human rights violations and conflict, so that we can learn a little bit about what Canadians of this region are facing over the past several decades. Over the past 70 years, Kashmir has been a center of major conflict and human rights violations. Heavily occupied by over 800,000 Indian troops and militia, Kashmir has become an open-air prison for about 8 million or so indigenous Kashmiris. While the world scrutinizes Kashmir's complex and multi-layered history and politics, the focus is removed from what actually matters, what is at stake, and that is the innocent Kashmiris who are caught in a deadly cycle of violence and warfare, unfortunately. The region's ethnic and religious discrimination, unlawful detention, and relentless military crimes have caused the United Nations and human rights groups to clash with the government of India. August 5th marks the first anniversary of the reannexation and the lockdown of the occupied Kashmir by the Indian government and army. Today, we have three Kashmiri Canadians who will share their perspectives and their stories on the one-year-old nightmare for their families. With us today, I would like to first introduce Zubair Dar. He is a researcher and a global correspondent journalist with experience reporting on politics and violence in Kashmir region. He earned a scholarship from Reuters Institute for Study of Journalism, where he studied water politics and policy. Passionate about Kashmir's water resources, Zubair later completed a master's in environmental sciences from Energy and Resources Group in UC Berkeley. Growing up in Kashmir's civil war period, his travels across India and Pakistan brought him face to face with the violence faced by Kashmiris. Today, Zubair maintains his interest in South Asian development and continues his research on water. Welcome, Zubair, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Next, please welcome Sister Sabia Zargar. Sabia has worked as an educational assistant at the Isna Elementary School in Mississauga for over 7 years. She has earned both a Bachelor of Science and Bachelor of Education from the University of Kashmir itself. While her career in education began in her homeland of Kashmir, Sabia continued teaching after relocating to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Sabia has also formerly worked in Canadian real estate. Of course, today we also have, and we're happy to have, the son, a wonderful son of Sabia. He's joining his mom, the 11-year-old Sohan. So thank you, Sohan, for being with us. He also hails from Kashmir. He was born in the region and takes after his mom with his love and concern for Kashmir, mashallah. As a Canadian middle school student, we will also get a valuable perspective from Sohan today, a youth perspective that is often missing when we talk about such, of course, difficult situations and difficult conversations. So, we want to delve right into the conversation, and want to hear from Zubair first. Basically, we want to hear from you for those of us Canadians who have no idea what is happening to Kashmir for the past 70 years, what's happening to Kashmir even the past 1 year, before our so-called lockdown that we are, of course, rightfully very concerned about across Canada and the US and across the world. There was another lockdown that has had unimaginable consequences for the people who live in that region, and that is the military lockdown for the past 1 year that Kashmiris have been facing. So Zubair, if you can help us understand, the history of this conflict, and the history of persecution. What is happening to Kashmiris for the past 70 years? And I know this is, this requires a seminar and a program of its own, but we just want to make sure that those of our listeners who have no idea, they can understand and appreciate where all of this started.
I think if you go into the recent past, you will have to at least go back to the events of 1947, where the colonial rule kind of ended for the South Asian region, and the region was divided between India and Pakistan, as we all know, on religious grounds. Kashmir seems to have been kind of caught in that conflict a little bit at that point of time, and at the same time bear the brunt of being a Muslim majority region which was ruled by a Hindu Maharaja, who at that point of time, as decided to write, as we have been hearing, is called the instrument of accession. There are people who doubt that, but for the majority of it, it does seem to be that an instrument of accession was signed by a Maharaja who had lost all possible power on the ground, and against whom there was a long-standing political movement run ever since 1931, like very organized way, and before that as well. And as Kashmir finds itself at the cusp of establishing a more democratic rule and getting throwing away the feudal establishment that ruled Kashmir at that point of time, and that is when India and Pakistan become two independent countries. And of course, a question is posed to Kashmir: where do they want to go in this new setup? Do you want to join Pakistan, or do they want to join India? What's very important is, at that point of time, and since that point of time, I will put it this way: the Hindu ruler, the Muslim subject, has, that dynamic has always stayed the same. And ever since then, there has been a continuous political, cultural, as well as military aggression towards Kashmir from India, especially, for and then at the same time, trying to involve international organizations in this. For example, when India went to United Nations, and the United Nations Security Council passed resolution after resolution, and in that, which was very well, very well specified, that Kashmir would be given a right to self-determination, and that became the rallying cry for Kashmiris. And ever since then, there has been a movement going on the ground in many different forms about getting that right to self-determination and decide what the future of Kashmir was going to be. Unfortunately, that hasn't been able to kind of be put in practice for many different reasons, but especially because of India's complete denial at the later stages of the 70-year period that they are relevant anymore. And I think the closest that Kashmir came to a resolution was at Musharraf's time, but somebody in Delhi maybe developed cold feet and looked at it as vote bank politics and left Kashmiris stranded where they are. The last thing I would add about the Kashmir situation, about the conflict, is that the kind of aggression that Kashmir is facing right now has crossed the boundaries of like a normal conflict. It has now entered a phase where the identity of the Kashmiri Muslim is at stake, and we are seeing how situation is developing, where there is a good possibility of a quick demographic change in Kashmir to kind of reduce Kashmiris to a minority and take away any voice from them that they could have in their own land. And that is what we are seeing unfolding right now in front of our eyes every day.
Well, thank you very much for really summarizing such a complex and complicated history of Kashmir in the few minutes that you did. And there's so much more to it, of course, that we will explore a bit more on our show today as well a bit. You know, you grew up in Kashmir. You have seen the busy, bustling, hustling marketplaces, the crowds, you know, of Kashmir. Despite, of course, all the aggression you have seen in the past, you know, Kashmiri is supposed to be a beautiful place, a place of lively, beautiful people. But ever since now, you know, we have seen the August 5th clampdown on Kashmir, and even harsher and harder, you know, harsher lockdown basically on Kashmiris. Of course, Kashmir has turned into a ghost town at this point. And so can you describe what are some of the essential services that have been blocked, that have been taken away from a common Kashmiri living in basically trapped in that open air prison for the past 1 year in particular?
Well, I think if we just talk about the past 1 year, then it negates the fact that there is more than 500,000 troop deployment in Kashmir, Indian troop deployment in the Indian part of Kashmir. And life has not been any better before to say that it has worsened. It has worsened in a different way, but life has always been like living in an open prison. And what the latest situation has done is that it has made sure that there are no basic rights available anymore. That doesn't mean that there were all the rights available earlier, but the suspension of basic human rights has reached a point where like it doesn't seem that you will be heard anywhere. It doesn't seem that any argument will work. It doesn't seem that it is at a stage where like you might lose a power battle. It is like aggression of a type where like you are now losing your culture, you're losing your identity. What has happened over the last 1 year since abrogation of the Article 370 and 35A, what has happened is that Kashmiris are now feeling that it's not the internet that's taken away, it's the voice that has completely been taken away, because Kashmiris gathered their voice in 2008 when they started opposing very communal policies, extended into Kashmir through the governor that is appointed by New Delhi and sometimes directly by New Delhi as well. And the pro-New Delhi parties do play a great role in that because they, as Kashmiris, play a part in that cultural aggression. So Kashmiris did rally around it since 2008. And what seems to be happening is that the Kashmiris are trapped in their own homes, and rallying around that or collectively raising a voice around that is being made impossible, to the point that you are going to face more questions online, and there are brigades out there targeting you, whether you're a student, you're a researcher, you're a professor in a university, you have any kind of voice possible, whether within Kashmir or outside, you are targeted and you are told to shut up otherwise. So that is the kind of aggression that is going on right now. That is what has been happening since August 5. It's not just the internet. It is actually taking away the voice that could have existed in many different forms.
Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that. And, we want to talk to Sabia now. Sabia, you traveled to the Jammu Kashmir region last summer. And you were actually there when the clampdown or the lockdown started, of course, on August 5th. So tell us why you traveled there and what you witnessed when you were there on the ground for that 1 week at least. And what did you see the indigenous Kashmiri people, how they were dealing with it and what they actually had to face?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank you for giving me an opportunity to do my tiny bit for my Kashmiri people. It was, honestly speaking, it was my dream vacation. I was traveling to Kashmir after 5 long years. These 5 long years, I have not seen my family. So this was actually a dream vacation where my son was like now kind of big enough to remember, see my culture, remember, connect to it. I wanted to take him to the school I have done my schooling from, my university. Like, we had such great plans that you plan before going for a vacation. And it didn't, like, what we planned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had different plans, which I, like, initially I was upset about it, but then I got to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because it gave my son a real picture of Kashmir, what we had been going through over there in these years. My son, like, first impression that we, like, when we were in the plane and we were about to land, the first impression that my son was like, okay, where are we landing? Why? Because you could see near the airport, there are big army camps very close to the airport. So when you are about to land and you look out of the window, that is the first impression that he got. Why? Where are we landing? Where are we going? It looked, for him, it was like as if we were going to a military camp. So that was his first impression for Kashmir. And as soon as we came, like, out of the airport, there were military men deployed at each entrance of every road, like main road, and there are lanes. At each lane there was a military personnel with a big gun, which, like, they don't get to here. Like, if I compare it with the Canadian authorities, even in my school, if the police comes for a workshop, they are not allowed to take out their guns. They are not allowed to show their guns to the kids. This is the kind of a country we live in, and whereas in my country, they are holding big guns in their hands, trying to terrorize young minds, women, children over there. And my son was like, literally, he was traumatized to look at all this. Like, why are they holding these guns? Why is it like that? This was in the beginning. And within few weeks, we started, like, the military, more military deployment in the valley. Like, roads were blocked for long hours because there was a military convoy coming in. It was kind of like we were suspecting that something is wrong. Why is it? But it was kind of connected to the yatra that we have every year in Kashmir for the Hindu pilgrims who come and visit the Amarnath. And everybody kind of connected it with that, but it slowly it got worse. And eventually, within few days, that it was something is happening, and they canceled the yatra. And then one fine day, we are locked in our homes, and there is no internet, there is no phone call. Like, our phone became a useless thing because no landlines were working, no internet was there. You couldn't even you could not even connect to a next door neighbor because there was military all over the place. Like, when we say lockdown here, it is not the same. I want to convey it to our audience that lockdown, when we say lockdown, it is not what we have here. Here you have internet, you can go and visit your neighbor, you can go to the grocery store, you can buy food. It is not the same thing. Lockdown in Kashmir means you are in your home. You cannot even go to your main door. At some places, you are not even allowed to open a window. The moment you open a window, a military man shouts at you and screams at you and forces you to close that window. You're not allowed. This is what the Kashmiri lockdown looks like. It is not the same where you can go out, have a drive, even when it was worse, like when we were actually in a state of emergency, we could go out and get groceries, we could go out for a walk, we could go out for a drive, but it is not the same. It's like we were asked to be precautioned and do not leave the house if it is not necessary. But there we are forced to do that. And that is so different. My father, who was not well, thank God we had saved, we had already purchased some medicines, but we have a cousin living next to our house, and we have a common door in our fence. We made that common door because of the prevailing circumstances that you cannot visit your next door neighbor through the road. There would be military. That's why we have a common door between our fences. He was operated. He had to go and get his bandages replaced. He couldn't go. He was not allowed to do that. Was not allowed to do that. For us, preponing our tickets and getting a ride to the airport took me I had to walk for 2 kilometers with my son. being checked at each place by a military personnel. Why are you going? Why you have to go? I wanted to go and take the ask the permission from the police authorities to get a curfew pass so that I can be taken to the airport with so that I can be dropped to the airport. My father is not well. He could not take me, so I had to ask somebody to do it for me. For that, it took me 2 kilometers with my Canadian passport. That was one savior for me, that I am a Canadian citizen now.
Yeah.
So with my son, I holded his hand and we went walking 2 kilometers to the police station and begged them for a curfew pass. And to my surprise, they didn't had a vehicle, they didn't had any guns, they didn't had any phones over there. Like the Jammu Kashmir police itself was helpless to give me any pass or anything. He said, I cannot issue it now. I will talk to the authorities. You come back a day before when you will be traveling, and I will issue a pass for the person who will drop you at the airport. Like, wow. He couldn't issue it a few days prior. No, you have to come a day prior, and that pass will be a one-time use, and he has to take that pass will be only valid for the route I am taking to the airport, and he will be taking address was in it, route was explained. Like, if he would use that, he cannot. That pass was strictly for the airport use, for nothing else. And for that period, that 1 week that I was in that lockdown, we had to use milk powder because we couldn't get milk. Usually we have it in Kashmir. The milkman comes and gives you milk at your house. We didn't get that. We had to use the milk powder. We had to get vegetables. If somebody has a kitchen garden, they can use this. Otherwise, people will survive on lentils. That's the only food you can save.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing this. This is definitely heartbreaking hearing all the things not only you went through, but I mean the things that people on the ground, of course, were facing and have been facing. And I wanted to bring in Sohan at this point. I mean, you have been, the last time before this trip, you went there, you were just a 3-year-old boy. I mean, you came there, of course, as a 3-year-old boy. So, of course, you wouldn't probably remember anything at that time. But when you went back this time, what were some of the things that you saw that struck you? And I know your mom has described some of the things, your initial reactions from the plane itself when you saw all the guns and the military. But what were some of the things from your perspective you saw that was really different and shocking from your perspective coming from Canada?
Honestly, when we were landing and I saw those military men, I thought that, what? Like, in Canada, all the policemen keep their guns in a pocket, but all these men were just had a little sack. It was like a sack on them. And like, it was not even on lock. Like, and my mom, she said that, oh, it's normal. I'm like, okay, that's pretty weird, but it's all right. And then later on, we walk to the scan, and the military men increased. Like, they almost doubled. And then I thought that this is definitely not normal at this point. But my mom said it's normal, because she's been living in Kashmir for several years, and if she finds it normal, but if you just came from Canada, and mashallah, what a safe country this is, and then you come to an environment where policemen come with the biggest guns that you couldn't even imagine up to you, and they scan you. I was literally trembling when the policemen were scanning us. I was like mentally in shock. Then on our way back home, I told my grandmother. My grandmother wasn't shocked at all. She's like, it happens. And when we went to go get the curfew pass, I'm like, Ma, how far is it? My mom said, I don't remember exactly. So we walked for 2 kilometers, yes. And when we went there, policemen, it was like they were wearing handcuffs that were invisible. They had restrictions as well. And when I realized that police also has restrictions, that's when I realized that Kashmir is not a place where I can feel that safe. And my grandmother, like I wanted to go outside because I was so bored inside without the internet. I ran outside and I was running, and my grandmother held my hand at the last minute and she said that you cannot go outside. I said, "Come on, Granny, please." She said, "No, okay, fine." She let me go out for 1 minute, and then she brought me back in because there were a wave of people that were coming in, and it was like a drill. It was like a drill that, like, when men came in, all the boys just left their cricket bats, left all of their equipment, and just ran. It was like a drill. Like, I was shocked, and then my grandmother just pulls me back inside. And then I asked my mom what was going on. And then she said, "I don't know. Ask your grandmother." My grandmother was talking to a man outside, one of the people who came with the wave. And they said that military is coming in the valley. So that's when I realized that, like, no, this can't, like, this is not normal. This isn't normal at all. And when I'm even talking about it, I shiver. When I'm talking about this, I shiver a lot.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for your courage, Sohan, sharing your personal experience of what you witnessed, especially when the lockdown started. And sad reality is that this is a day-to-day common reality of course, Kashmiri boys, Kashmiri kids, Kashmiri men and women. Constant terror, constant horror, constant trembling. There's just so many reasons to be actually afraid and scared and never feel secure there. Zubair, I wanted to talk to you a bit about the perceptions around the conflict. If you look at not only the Indian media but even mainstream media out there, at times this conflict or this aggression against indigenous population of Kashmir is often addressed as and referred to as a civil conflict or civil war or internal Indian matter, internal Indian issue, or just is pure politics, and of course and interestingly, knowing that in Kashmir being of course a state which has the highest number of Muslims or percentage of Muslims, it makes you think that story that we are told. Of course, there's a lot more to it. So, from your perspective, I mean, how do Kashmiris want this conflict to be described to a common Canadian or Canadian Muslims who's watching?
Well, I think let's go back to where you started. Why the conflict in media is mostly portrayed as an internal issue by India, or largely by and large by the mainstream media. I think first of all you have to understand that India is a big market, and money determines a lot of things in today's world. India managed to reach a 400 million middle class, which are consumers, which consume all kinds of different products. And it also covers the underbelly of 600 million who don't have access to those products and services because they don't fall in the middle class, but they are ignored. And, in that, when India is asked, anytime India is asked a question about Kashmir, internationally, they say it's a bilateral issue. They have maintained it for the longest time. That's a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. And Pakistan has been pushing back and saying that, no, it's not just a bilateral issue. It's an issue that has relevance in the international politics because of the resolutions that were passed by the United Nations, because of how Kashmiris would want to determine their own future and their rights kept secure through those resolutions. India's easy escape that it's a bilateral issue falls flat when India is asked by Pakistan that why don't we talk about it if it's a bilateral issue. India's response to Pakistan at that point of time is that it is our internal issue. This is where that argument falls flat. For example, when Indian Parliament decided to abrogate Article 370 and 35A, which means that the core of the semi-autonomous structure politically and a certain kind of identity culturally that was intact till now in Kashmir. Abrogating that article and abrogating those provisions of the Indian Constitution without consulting Kashmiris, without even telling Kashmiris that this is happening. There is no consultation process, and there has never been a debate about it. And no Kashmiri has ever been even involved in given any kind of media space. That should tell you that that argument does not stand the test of time. It is an argument that actually masks the Indian project, which lately has turned into a brazen Hindu Rashtra project for India, in which the Muslims that live in India or Muslims of Kashmir have no place. And this has been in operation for a very long time. The right-wing nationalist parties in India have had this on their manifesto for many decades now. And as sad as it feels to put it like that, but the Indian liberal political class has by and large been kind of a happy collaborator in this project, because what that has done is given them a chance to make Muslims a vote bank for themselves, because then you can go to a Muslim and say that I will fight for you, and the Muslim vote bank would kind of support you. And that's what the Indian liberal have done, who ruled India for the longest time between 1947 till like late 90s, when BJP started making inroads into power, like major inroads into power. And the way it plays out is that the Hindu Rashtra project started showing its face in the shape of the demolition of the Babri Mosque. 1992, branding Kashmir movement as Atakvad and Ugravad and all that, was showed that how the the political powers who want to convert India into Hindu Rashtra, how brazen they can be, and how apologetic the liberal class can be about it. The only discussion that has happened so far about the application of Article 370 was a very feeble challenge that, it should have happened more democratically. It's not, and it will not stand the test of time. What do they expect? Where do they expect that test to happen? They expect that test, for example, to happen in the Supreme Court of India. If you look at order after order that was passed by the Supreme Court of India about issues that came to discussion in the Supreme Court about Kashmir, you would see that Supreme Court steps aside and gives the government time to do something else, so that that this issue is masked, and then pass a very feeble order or completely deny Kashmiri the very basic human right that should exist without taking any conflict, without making conflict an excuse for any of that. I was hearing Suhan, and I can imagine what kind of alarm he faced. He kind of felt when he went to Kashmir. I spent a very small part of my childhood in the Kashmir before 1990, when there was no violence. And in that, I can tell you the only concern a parent had when a child went out was, has he eaten? Has she eaten? Is he dead? And I have a small recollection of that time of abandon when you would go and jump into a stream and swim there till you were tired and come home and eat and take a little bit of rest and run back. And that time of abandon does not exist anymore. The concern that a parent has is that should I choose between a child's life and their education, and that can tell you like how risky the daily life is in Kashmir. Arundhati Roy described it this way. She said that the normalcy in Kashmir, the normalcy that is projected by India, that Kashmir is normal, this, that, and the other. That kept happening. That narrative was pushed for a very long time between 2000 and 2008. And that normalcy, Arundhati Roy described, and she said, it looks like a traffic jam managed by a soldier with a AK-47 rifle. And that's what Sohan saw when he went there. So you could be any times asked to show your identity and prove your identity in your own village. You could anytime be asked to reveal the contents of your bag when you're going somewhere. On days your village would be surrounded, and I have seen those days, and I have a very clear memory of that, when I was used as a human shield to go, in my village from house to house search. And as terrifying as it may appear to you, one of the reasons I would go happily with those, house to house searches was to create a possibility where you could escape torture at a certain place where all the villagers would be assembled in a school compound, and some of them would be picked up just on the suspicion that they, for example, had a long beard, or they trembled when they were paraded in front of a person, in the van or something like that, and then pick them up and take them to a third-degree torture where you could hear the screams of these people that came out of those torture centers, right in front of you. And being a human shield and being able to escape that and not have the memory of that or those screams in your ears at night, that felt a better option. So that should tell you, what Kashmiri life could look like. I remember I was very little when those kind of crackdowns on Kashmiri villages started, where you would be taken out, whether it is hot, cold, it doesn't matter, and you would be paraded and you would be tortured. So that's where life is. It is a military conflict. It's no less than occupation, and it's occupation. It was occupation of the land. It was occupation of the resources. Water resources had a huge role to play, but it has now come to become, ever since 1990, it is intensifying as an occupation of your mind in every which way possible. And for that, India is using its maximum political force. It is using the backing of its own laws, where Armed Forces Special Powers Act gives a trooper on the ground the right to shoot anybody that he may suspect to be a threat without fearing the consequences, without having to justify themselves. That why did they do that? So Armed Forces Special Powers Act gives them that much power. It is seen economically that each and every year you see more and more economic resources, or the exchange of money, or inside the economy in general being more and more controlled by the state and not allowing people to have that freedom. It is seen in the organization, like your organizations are, whether they're journalistic organizations, whether they're organizations that work in the civil sector, they're being asked to follow a certain format, and without outside which work would not be allowed. Political organizations, social organization at the grassroots levels has becoming more and more impossible. And what you are seeing in Kashmir, for example, in 2008, was an outpouring of that sentiment, where everybody suddenly came to the roads and said enough is enough. And after that, you saw the arrests of leaders. You saw anybody who would kind of appear as the leader who could take this moment anywhere, put under detention without being produced in the court, arbitrary detention completely, and that cycle repeated and repeated and repeated. And some people in that have been in jail almost for a decade. And the only formality that just to conclude
Yes,
the
yes.
argument, the only formality that the police has to complete is to say that we let this person go through the gate of the jail where they are kept, and then arrest them right outside. And sometimes the people are arrested right inside the compound of the jail. They're just let out of their cell and
Wow.
put back under what we call as preventive detention. And preventive detention, like right now, even pro-India leaders, pro-Delhi leaders are in detention. Even we saw a video today of an old pro-India leader trying to talk to a camera crew over the fencing wall of his house, and he was dragged back, and the camera crew was asked to leave immediately. So that's how how it plays out in
Yes,
reality.
yes. Well, thank you, Zubair. I mean, certainly very, very grim picture, and I'm sure you can talk on and on about this, and we wouldn't be able to even do justice, of course, to this topic. There's so much more to talk about. I wanted to bring in a couple more very critical points, and just wanted to get your thoughts on this, and because we have about 10 minutes to go. Sabia, I want to ask you, what has been what has been the Canadian government's response to what's happening in Kashmir? You know, what have you seen from the Canadian government, and is that enough?
Honestly, I feel like that there has been a lot of silence from the Canadian government. Usually, we have Prime Minister Trudeau, who is so emotional, and like I consider him as that kind of a figure who is a humanitarian, who feels people's pain. That I'm kind of surprised at his response. Like I remember myself when he was running elections, and we went to Celebration Squares to see him, and my son kind of like stopped by, and like he was going away, and he said that do you know what is happening in Kashmir, because it was very recent and my son was like still in that trauma. So he felt that need to tell him, and he felt that he's going to do a miracle for Kashmiris, like that guy. He got Syrian refugees, he's doing so much for it, and he will do it. And the only thing he kind of touched his head like this, and he said, I know. And that I know meant a lot for him, and he thought that, oh mama, I conveyed it to him, a lot will happen. Although I knew that like a lot is coming in the news, a lot is being conveyed, but the response is not like it is not satisfying. Like India, Canada is in good ties with India. Like there can be done a lot more than what is being. Like I don't see those. There was not even a single press statement from the Trudeau government or any other. Like I would say, only NDP kind of like gave some kind of a response to us. But there was not a single press release by the Canadian government, running Canadian government, in favor of Kashmiris, or kind of a little bit, they would put a kind of a little pressure on the Indian government about what they are doing in Kashmir. I'm saddened to know that like nothing like that happened.
So yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's abysmal. The response has been thoroughly disappointing. There has never been a categorical statement of condemnation. Even the statement that was issued last November, I believe October, was very lukewarm. Does not even mention India, the actual aggressor, perpetrator of the lockdown. I mean, recently, of course, there is a petition by MP Scott Duval from Hamilton. He's an NDP MP. That is actually demanding Canadian government to actually do something about it, and we want to make sure that Canadians actually make sure that they actually sign this petition. This is a parliamentary petition that is demanding some action from the government of Canada. So if those of you who have not signed it yet, please make sure you go to justiceforallcanada.org, and you can actually find the petition right at the top, and on the Kashmir page and campaigns page, for you, a link for you to actually go and sign this petition. Now, just a couple more questions before we end. Subhan, sorry, not Subhan. I wanted to ask you, and it's great to hear actually that you actually went up to the Prime Minister and you actually addressed this, and then that's very courageous of you. What would you want Canadian government to do more if the Prime Minister listened to you today, and if the leaders of the world listen to you today? As a Kashmiri youth growing up in Canada, what would you want the Canadian government to do, and what kind of actions you would want to see?
First of all, I would like the minimum that I would like them to do, supply some source to Kashmir. Like, you know how they can't get any medical support? If one thing that I would really love was if they would give some medical support to Kashmir, bring some refugees, help the economy grow back after this lockdown, and that's pretty much minimum all I want. Minimum.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I want to ask all three of you, what were some of the best memories of Kashmir you ever had? And Sabia, you mentioned you went on a dream vacation pretty much after a long time to Kashmir, and you were with your family, whether doing this trip or growing up. I want to hear from all three of you, what were some of your positive, beautiful memories of Kashmir that you missed today? So Sabia, we'll start with you.
I always have this love for my Kashmir, like that. We cared for each other. We were very caring people. We used to feel each other's pain, and the best, I love the hospitality that we had in Kashmir, the friends, the beautiful valley. I remember myself, growing up, my grandfather, my uncles, they used to take me to these beautiful places in Kashmir. I remember going to the Dal Lake, and we used to sit in that shikara, and the nice breeze and the beautiful clean water that we used to see in Dal Lake. It is not there anymore. This is one of the things that India is doing to us, not taking care of our natural resources, just making money from the tourism, and then these natural resources are ruined. It doesn't feel the same. The water is not that clean. Dirty water goes in there. I miss those memories, that beautiful feeling safe, going to school. Honestly, for me, those days we used to see guns and these things in movies. And now it has come to a point in my life seeing, then we went through a phase, like my brother Zubair said, that it was different before 1990. And 1990 turned it totally upside down, and then different era started. Today, if my son chooses to play a game that involves guns, I cannot hear that sound. It really bothers me. I get those goosebumps, and I get so nervous. Literally, I have to sit down, drink a glass of water. When he started off, he said, "What happens, Mom?" I said, "You don't know the pain the people go through when you actually get that bullet." And these memories kind of crushed all the beautiful memories were the beautiful places we have in Kashmir, the friendship, the love, the warmth we had for all the religion. Honestly speaking, when they talk about us as being religious extremists, I want to tell them I am a practicing Muslim, and I have studied in a Hindu school, which was run by a Hindu. And today I can say I know about that religion more than a lot of Hindus, actually. We had that respect for each other's religion. We used to live together as friends and family, and there was no hatred for each other. We had that. We lived as Kashmiris, not as Hindus, Muslims. We had so much, even though we were in majority, but still we had that same kind of love and care for that minority Hindus in there.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. Not Khurram, Zubair, would you like to go next, please?
I think living in the conflict in Kashmir for many years, makes you think in ways that are more like academic, I guess, than personal experiences. But I will tell you this. As a child, I experienced Kashmir's streams, like pristine streams. You would go, you would, throw your school bag away, run, take a uniform off, and you used to have uniforms in school, right? And just dive in and not carry a care on your mind. That does not exist in Kashmir anymore. Because that doesn't exist, what that translates into is that the culture that survived like for 5,000 years and grew with every influence that came either from India or from Central Asia or grew locally. It absorbed that influence, and it grew stronger, and it kind of carried all those shades in it. What's happening now is that place is choking. It is choking for the want of peace of mind. It is choking because of the threat of violence on your body, on your culture, on your economy, on your livelihood every day. And the result of that, the manifestation of that, you can see in you know in how people interact with each other, what their concerns are, what their when they meet each other, what do they talk about. You will see that in that. You will see in deterioration of the quality of water resources and how the environment is kind of in itself kind of getting poisoned. The pristine stream that I would take a swim in every day, I saw that in 2017. I went to many places where I used to swim as a child. All those streams are choking with plastic and sewage, and nobody cares about it. Your major lakes, the Dal Lake is choking, Buller Lake is choking. Government policy, government apathy over decades has reduced one of the biggest freshwater lakes in Kashmir into a small lake where like a small part of it is shown to the tourist and rest is like a no-go area. Thriving economy destroyed in that lake and outside as well. You don't see the kind of art produced in Kashmir that was produced before, because most of the art kind of pays attention to conflict, and any other cultural expression takes a backseat because of how important it is to pay attention to the conflict right now. I grew up in a village where like at a certain wedding in anybody's home, the village would come together and it would be a feast cooked by a village led by a couple of head chefs who would know how to handle things. Today does not feel the same. As much as Kashmiris want to come together to celebrate happiness, the heaviness in heart about what life has come to be does not go. So my happiest memories have over a period of time seen kind of the kind of pressures that Kashmir has seen, has saw things manifesting itself in very grim ways, and it is now a very distant memory that Kashmir was sometime very peaceful and enjoyable.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and I know this is not easy sharing beautiful memories while you guys are going through so much difficult time now, and you have gone through already for the past few decades, in fact. Sohan, any positive memories, your recent visit that you had a year ago, anything you'd like to share from that trip?
I would like to share that when we first came, there was very fresh, and I loved the air. Honestly, I would want to go outside every single day in the morning just for the air. And then soon there was gas that made us cry. I don't know exactly what it's called. A gas that would make us cry. And pepper spray. I know one of the substances they used in the air, pepper spray. And one of them was a gas that used to make you cry. I don't exactly remember, but I loved the fresh air before they added these gases and pepper spray. And my mom, I had a great memory of the boys playing outside, having a great time. And my mom told me about a thing that happened a couple years ago when she was a kid in Kashmir, in which basically boys, there was a boy, he was around the age of 10, and his mother was sleeping and he was going to get kidnapped. His mother woke up in the nick of time and she said, I'll do whatever you would like, just give me my son back. So they asked for an amount of money that I think I wouldn't have seen in my life. I couldn't probably never see in my life. So that mother, alhamdulillah, all Kashmiris are very collective. So they all gathered a bunch of money and they gave it and they got the boy back. But it's almost like slavery, how boys would be bought just to work. It's almost like slavery coming back.
Mm-hmm.
People say there's no more slavery going on. It's like slavery.
Of course. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Sohan. Thank you, Zubair. And thank you, Sabia, for sharing such difficult, painful memories and perspectives on this very, very, of course, difficult topic of Kashmir and the lockdown of Kashmir. We are almost out of time. What I want to ask you is this, and maybe Sabia, we can start with you. I know you have something to say. In 1 minute, each one of you, if you can share with us what Canadians can do to help us end genocide of Kashmiris, end this lockdown of indigenous Kashmiris, end this colonial settler project. What are some couple of practical things a common Canadian can do to actually help us achieve that? So Sabia, if you can start us off, we have very limited time, so if you can be very quick, that would be great.
Yes, I would be very quick. When I like, you can see today, my son, the only good memory he had of Kashmir was the fresh air, which when the lockdown started, they started spraying these tear gas sprays in the air, and that is not even there now. So you can see that he lost all the memories of Kashmir. That was like, this is what it came up to. My only request for you guys is like, please boycott the Indian products. This is one thing that is going to crush India, and this money they are using against us. They are buying weapons and arms with this money, and they are using it against us. So my request for local Canadian is, please stop buying Indian products, and kind of like whenever there is a Kashmiris organize something, please come and join us. There are petitions which you can sign, which can really help, which would really force the Canadian government to stand up for us, to take a serious action and kind of push India to stop this genocide in Kashmir.
Thank you. Actually, can we have Sohan go next, and then Zubair, please?
Yes, Sohan.
Okay. I think one thing that could end all of this is a couple simple words. Canadians to force India to stop pressuring on Kashmir. That's all we basically need. If Canadian government just says that and they force them, I think the whole problem could just go away. It would be like nothing happened ever. If these few words would have just been spoken earlier, nothing would have happened at all.
Well, definitely international pressure and demanding the United Nations resolution, 48 to be implemented is really what we definitely need to pressurize Indian government to go back to and implement. So thank you for sharing that. Zubair, please, your last word, 1 minute.
My request to Canadians in general is that please start paying attention. If you care about humanity, if you care about people's rights, if you care about people who are suffering any kind of injustice, please start paying attention. I'm not here to say that they should do one or the other thing. I'm just saying that please start paying attention so that you understand what people in that region are suffering, and then you will find your ways to convey that message that that shouldn't happen. And if you need our help in that, there are Kashmiri organizations who could kind of you could get in touch with them and see what kind of political activities they are doing and what kind of, how they're organizing, and you can be a part of that. First of all, please pay attention. Don't trust my word. You have enough out there to see for yourself.
Awesome. Thank you, Zubair, Sabia, Sohan, for your courage, for your resilience, for your time. We want to hear more of you, and we wish you all the best as you do your part to raise awareness about such a difficult, family situations, such a difficult and complex political a conflict and such a massive, of course, genocide that has been ongoing for the past 7 decades plus. So thank you once again for your courage and for your time today, for being with us. Those of you who have not done it yet, folks, the least you can do is call your MP, call your member of parliament, ask them what have you done, what has your government, our government has done to pressurize the Indian government to end the lockdown. Go to freekashmir.ca to sign the petition, the parliamentary petition. And as been mentioned, there are some wonderful Kashmiri groups and organizations who are trying to raise awareness. So with that, unfortunately, we're going to have to end here. Really appreciate your time. Once again, you are watching Canada Today on Muslim Network TV with your host, Taha Ghayur. And we look forward to seeing you again. Take care, stay safe, and stay productive. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.